Now, turning to a poll of Ukrainians, which this week found the most popular foreign leader in the country is none other than British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Yes, these are the results from the US pollster's Cygnal. It showed the United Kingdom is viewed far more favourably than the European Union, the United States and NATO. Now, for those watching on TV, that graphic might be a little complicated for this time on a Friday morning, so here are the net favourability ratings for each leader polled there. Top, of course, is Zelensky on plus 79, but then Boris Johnson comes on at plus 50, numbers he would dream of here in the UK. Joe Biden is next on half Boris's total at plus 26, followed by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on plus 23. Chinese President Xi Jinping takes us down into negative territory at minus 19, and Vladimir Putin is most hated of all at minus 87. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Chris Lane, the Director of Client Strategies at Cygnal, the American pollsters who conducted this research. Welcome to the programme, Chris. First of all, I've got and actually thank you for waking up so early as well, coming from across the pond. I've just got one enormous question before we get into the nuts and bolts of this. How on earth do you poll a war zone?
It's very complicated, but the Ukrainian people and the company in Ukraine we partnered with did an amazing job, and we polled 1,000 Americans, 1,000 citizens of the UK, the EU, and of Ukraine. And as you mentioned, President Zelensky has rallied the world. The support for him is overwhelming. And as you mentioned, Prime Minister Johnson would love those poll numbers in the UK. President Biden's in the same boat. The world leaders are viewed very strongly in the Ukraine, and the world has really rallied around with this battle between good and evil.
It's extraordinary that, for example, there's a lot of bad media at the moment in the United Kingdom over the United Kingdom's strategy, for example, towards refugees. The European Union is waiving visas, whereas we have, albeit a speeded up visa process, still paperwork that needs to be done. It seems like that hasn't really hit home in Ukraine. What the Ukrainians seem to care about, judging by this poll, is who has been supporting that country for many months, supplying weaponry, training the army, and offering that solid sanction support.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic. I mean, the people of Ukraine are incredibly grateful and love the support of the Western world in this, but they also express that they actually don't want to be a part of NATO. So it's an interesting balance there. And then the people of Ukraine are overwhelmingly optimistic. This is not a PR stunt. Almost a 2-to-1 ratio. People feel like their country is heading in the right direction. And compare that to the rest of the Western world, it's almost the exact opposite. And we're not the ones dealing, as you mentioned, being in a war zone.
It's fascinating to look at that NATO number, because NATO in that poll had a negative rating. I wonder if that is people thinking, because of course the government of Ukraine is very in favour of NATO membership, very in favour of EU membership. I'd hasten to say that probably many people in the United States and the United Kingdom are in favour of Ukraine joining NATO as well. Why do you think it is that the Ukrainians didn't seem to be so supportive of that defensive alliance?
You know, I'm not sure about that, but what I can tell you is the Ukrainian people are so proud of who they are, how they're fighting, how they're standing up to Russia, and the rest of the world is happy to support that cause. Over 65% of all the entities we've talked about are in favor of military support and financial support of Ukraine to fight this battle. When you talk about boots on the ground and military intervention, those numbers become a little more 50-50. But the world has rallied around Ukraine and President Zelensky. President Zelensky's numbers are the type of numbers that Vladimir Putin gets at the ballot box illegitimately, and he's getting them legitimately with his people, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that.
And just finally in this conversation, you of course polled the United States and the United Kingdom as well. Is there broad support for the sanctions that are being brought? Of course, they are going to have an impact in the countries, in our countries as well. It is going to push up that cost of living. But is there support for that?
As of this point, yes. We'll see how that number changes as gas prices continue to rise in both places, and we'll see how that support, hopefully it holds strong. But at this point, the world is rallying behind President Zelensky, behind Ukraine. The Ukrainian people are as optimistic as they could possibly be. And they deserve our praise. And hopefully we will continue to help them fight this battle.
Well, Chris Lane, Director of Client Strategies at the pollsters Cygnal, thank you very much for joining us here on The Briefing this morning and for waking up quite so early on the other side of the world.
Thanks for having me.